are reaching for an ingredient and realize you don't have it, or you just don't want to make a special trip to the store, there are some baking substitutions that will still allow you to whip up your favorite recipe. From our partners at MarthaStewart.com, here's a cheat sheet for when you're in a pinch.
Starting with flour. All-purpose flour is a key ingredient to have, but every once in a while a recipe calls for a specialty flour. But you can skip the shopping trip by putting that all-purpose flour to work. For cake flour, 1 cup equals 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. For pastry flour, 1 cup equals a half cup of all-purpose flour plus a half cup cake flour. If you are swapping out all-purpose flour for a gluten-free flour, the ratio is the same, 1 cup of gluten-free flour for every 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Moving on to baking soda and baking powder. As a substitute for 1 teaspoon of baking powder, try a half teaspoon of cream of tartar plus a 1/4 cup teaspoon baking soda. Baking soda is a trickier swap, but for every 1 teaspoon of baking powder needed, you can sub in a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Now for dairy. For 1 cup of whole milk, you can substitute with 3/4 of a cup plus 2 tablespoons of skim milk plus 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. For 1 cup of half and half, use a half cup whole milk and a half cup heavy cream. For 1 cup of buttermilk, substitute 1 cup of whole milk plus 1 tablespoon white wine vinegar or lemon juice. Combine and let sit about 10 minutes. Moving on to fats. If you don't have a stick of butter, you can definitely use 1 stick of margarine. If you need a substitute for 1 cup of vegetable oil, try 1 cup of neutral oil such as canola or grapeseed oil. And finally, sugar substitutes. For 1 cup of superfine sugar, you can substitute it with granulated sugar ground in a food processor. Use 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons. For 1 cup of powdered sugar, substitute with 1 cup of granulated sugar plus 1 teaspoon cornstarch ground in a food processor as well. As a substitute for 1 cup of light brown sugar, use 1 cup granulated sugar plus 1 tablespoon of molasses. Add another tablespoon for dark brown sugar. And if you don't have molasses, you can substitute for 1 cup with 3/4 of a cup dark brown sugar plus a 1/4 cup of water.
And a popular vegan substitute for eggs is mixing 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed with 2 tablespoons of water, mixing it up, letting it sit for 5 minutes, and doing that for each egg that the recipe calls for. There are so many great tips like this if you're vegan or gluten-free. Just go to MarthaStewart.com. Martha Stewart is owned by our parent company, the Meredith Corporation.